the headline. Steven Tyler accused of sexual assault of a minor in new lawsuit over a decades-old claim. Really kind of like a sign of the times. I'm gonna rephrase that, because normally when somebody says sign of the times, it's a bad thing. I don't know that this is necessarily a bad thing. It's definitely different, and it speaks to how times have changed. This is one of those stories that it was sort of like rock legend, rock lore. It's going to be interesting to see how everything turns out, because this is a story that is agreed to by both sides. There's no disconnect in regards to the story. The story is true. And in this case, we're talking about Steven Tyler, who's the legendary frontman for Aerosmith. Aerosmith, one of the great rock bands, American rock bands certainly, of all fucking time. So the lawsuit is accusing Steven Tyler of sexual assault, sexual battery, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Now, California has temporarily waived statutes of limitations for childhood sexual abuse allegations, which is, for those of you who would say, why do it now? Well, that statute of limitations door would have been closed. It is now open, so it's open season to put these lawsuits out there. So if you're going to do it, you got to do it now. Julia Holcomb alleges that Tyler, and this is such a fucking weird story, Tyler came to her mom and asked for her to grant him guardianship over her, which her mother did. And so Steven Tyler, who was, I think he was in his mid-20s. I believe he's like 25, 26 years old, something like that. Somewhere between 24 and 26. So he gets this 16-year-old girl and takes her on the road with him to essentially just be in-house pussy, and her mom signed off on her, which is fucking wild. And at the time, people knew about it. She went with him on tour. He openly, carried about with her as if she was his girlfriend, which she was. And they were together for 3 fucking years. And imagine the simple balls to be like, hey, you know what, Miss Jenkins, or whoever the fuck this woman is, you know what? I really want to fuck your underage teen daughter. Here's the issue. Not into going to jail. So I need you to sign this paper so I can penetrate and make ejaculations all over your baby. And then you're like, oh, fuck yeah, you're famous, right? I saw you on TV. Okay. And sure enough, sign the paper, and here we are just fucking from town to town. Now, this all starts when he meets her backstage at a show in Portland, Oregon. A 16-year-old girl. He takes her back to his hotel room. They have a nice long conversation. Even she says, he asked her about her home life. He was empathetic to what she was going through. He's like, yeah, man, that's a sad story. I really would like to help you. So let me take these panties off. And you know what I'm saying? It's real scumbag dude shit. And the thing about it, it's your dick. It's your dick that's doing it to you. Hormones, whatever you want to call it. You don't, as a guy, you don't realize that you're fucked up until it's done. You look at it in the rear view mirror and you're like, that looked like shit. But you know what I'm saying? That's how guys are. So after fucking this underage girl, he's already committed a fucking crime, a statutory rape, if you will. And he goes to her family. He's heard she has a fucked up family. She told him, she confided in him before he fucked her. So he goes to her family. Of course, they love him because they're all fucked up. And sure enough, sign it over. Now, both of them pretty much acknowledge the story to be the same. Steven Tyler admits to all this shit. For some reason, the fact that the parents had signed off back in the 70s, that must have been enough for you to be like, meh, no big deal. Where they split and have, obviously some sort of conflict is Julia Holcomb believes that Steven Tyler manipulated her and used her for sex. And that's it. That he didn't give a fuck about her. On top of the actual statutory rape going on here, There's also this thing where he knocked her up and then he put her under all this pressure to get an abortion that she was not necessarily into.
And his words to me were that I had to have the abortion right now or the doctors wouldn't do it because I was so far along. He wanted me to have that abortion before I left the hospital. I just kept saying no until he placed the decision between him and the baby, that I was going to have to go home if I decided to keep my baby.
Once again, it's such guy shit. Like he very badly did not want her to have this kid. And there was like an apartment fire and he was like, oh, you know what? Did you breathe in any smoke? Oh my God, that baby must be dead. That's fucking, that's oxygen deprivation. That baby's going to be all fucked up and, have a water head and all that shit. If you look at Steven Tyler's account of it, and he wrote about this is how accepted this whole thing was. When you hear that story, underage girl, fuck her, get the parents to sign off, take her from town to town, state to state, fucking her. That sounds fucked up, pressuring her into abortion, all that shit sounds super fucked up. But if you listen to Steven Tyler's account of it, he claims that he was considering marrying her. He says he loved her, that he fell in love with her at first sight. That's a 10-year spread. That's, that age spread is something that, flash forward another 10, 20 years. If you're talking about a 40-year-old and a 30-year-old or something like that, that's not really a crazy spread because you're not that different from one another. Really, we're the same assholes our whole lives. We just come to a point where we're like, okay, we're relatively mature. And so, yeah, I would say a 30 and a 40-year-old, a 40 and a 50-year-old, all that shit going on, so on and so forth. That's not a huge spread. But when you're talking about a fucking 16-year-old to a 25-year-old, those are people with like massively different life experiences. A 16-year-old girl has not lived a lot of life and doesn't know a lot of shit. We've had this argument here on this show in the past with the Dave Ellefson thing. There's a lot of fucking idiots out there. And I mean, what's the source of all bullshit in our world these days? Fucking idiots who don't understand basic concepts because they are too fucking moronic to see anything beyond themselves and their own wants and needs. So, in the Dave Ellefson case, you're talking about a 54-year-old who's, essentially grooming a 19-year-old. And the comments I would get, and I still get to this day, are that she's an adult, she knows what she's doing, and all that shit. How are you so fucking stupid that you think a teenager has had enough life experience to make these kind of choices? Listen, you hear the old, if there's grass on the field, play ball and all that shit. From an anatomical standpoint, you are correct. These women have hit puberty. They can get knocked up. They are technically women. But at the same time, it's just not fair from an emotional and a mental standpoint. If you're a guy who's in his, late 20s, early 30s, and anything beyond that, there's no way that you can't be manipulating this woman, regardless of what your intentions are. In this story, Steven Tyler says, I loved her. And let's take him at his word and say that he sees this girl in Portland, Oregon. He just immediately, oh my God, what a beauty. And he, goes and meets her, finds out she's 16 years old. At that point, you got to make a fucking decision because your status in life, if you're Steven Tyler, here you are, you're this fucking good-looking rock star, you're rich, you're traveling the world. Imagine what that looks like to a 16-year-old. So already the proportions are so thrown off. Regardless of Steven's intentions, he is manipulating that woman. The fact that he could convince her whole family to fucking sign off on it, that's the crazy thing to me. For years, Ted Nugent did this exact same thing, got the guardianship of an underage girl so he could take her from town to town fucking her. Jimmy Page was, once again, these were their girlfriends. They took them out publicly. They were never fucked with. Steven Tyler, he's a fucking dumbass in this story because in 1997, he wrote his memoir. And for those of you who don't know how these books get done, really what you do is you have a real writer show up, and the real writer essentially interviews you. And they take that interview, they write it in your voice, and that's your memoir. So let's go through a couple of these quotes. Steven Tyler, he says, quote, "Her parents fell in love with me, signed a paper over for me to have custody so I wouldn't get arrested if I took her out of state. I took her on tour with me." If you're somebody's guardian, are you not supposed to be taking care of that person, not just fucking them from town to town in the back of a bus? He said he would be able to provide better support than she was getting at home, promising to enroll her in school and give her medical care. And Tyler did not follow through on any of that shit, and instead got her super drunk and fucked up and fucked her as much as humanly possible. After the abortion, she left Tyler, went back to Portland. She became a devout Catholic, met her husband, and just kind of said, fuck it, But then Tyler, he goes and writes about it in his book. And supposedly he told these stories without getting any sort of consent from her, which you don't need to by law, I don't think. But it's a cool thing to do if you're going to say intimate shit about somebody. And in the book, Tyler says he subjected an underage girl to quote unquote involuntary infamy. And he did frame the whole thing as a romantic, loving relationship. You want to talk about what a fucking scumbag, gross piece of shit Steven Tyler is. Here's a quote from the book. "She was 16. She knew how to nasty, and there wasn't a hair on it." I mean, is that the most disgusting fucking thing for what at that point? I mean, this is 1997, so he would have been like, what, in his fucking late 40s, early 50s, to be thinking she knew how to nasty. Like, ugh, what a fucking, that's a disgusting thing to say about anybody. Though I've always thought Steven Tyler was just a gross fucking guttery piece of shit. That's been his gimmick. That's his character. Is that if you're a fucking woman and you're around him, he's going to try to fuck you, or he's going to say something really disgusting to you about wanting to eat your pussy or something like that. She knew how to nasty. Ugh. And there was an editor who read that and didn't think twice about him referring to a 16-year-old and saying she knew how to nasty and there wasn't a hair on it. The hair comment makes it sound like there was... That he got extra fucking, an extra pump out of fucking an underage kid, because if he was to say, listen, I met this girl, I fell in love with her before I even really knew her age, we were talking, all that shit, I didn't care, I just went for it, I was in love, whatever. But when you're saying there wasn't a hair on it, like you're bragging and shit, holy fuck. And in 1997, this is a grown-ass woman with kids, and here you are bragging about fucking her and bragging about her not having fucking pubic hair and shit like that. That's fucking gross, bro. Another quote from Steven Tyler's memoir. "With my bad self being 26 and she barely old enough to drive and sexy as hell, I just fell madly in love with her. She was a cute, skinny little tomboy dressed up as Little Bo Peep. She was my heart's desire, my partner in crimes of passion." Once again, as an editor, with my bad self being 26, I'm a bad motherfucker. Look at me fucking this 16-year-old tomboy. Yeah, women are tomboys when they're little kids. Fucking shit. My partner in crimes of passion. The really gross, like, pedo bullshit of like, oh, there wasn't a hair on it. Fucking disgusting, but it's so on his character that people just let it go. I mean, I've heard people say, oh, he's like America's horny uncle. Is that a thing? Does everyone have a horny uncle that tries to like fuck all their friends and stuff? My skin crawls when I hear him talk. He's so fucking gross. And I'm not saying he should be in jail. I'm not saying he should be canceled. I'm not saying any of that. What I'm saying is Steven Tyler is a creepy motherfucker. And at this point, listen, be happy you didn't go to jail. Because in the case of Julia Holcomb, your punk ass broke the law and you got fucking lucky that she had such fucked up parents that, or a parent, I don't know what the situation was. Whoever was in charge of her was fucked up enough to say, oh no, that's fine. And not even think about, the well-being of the person that they were in charge of. Supposedly he was like, oh, I'm going to send her to good schools and I'm going to do this and that. These fucking idiots believed it. Really, all he did was take her to the school of hard cocks and fuck her a bunch and get her all fucking drunk and, doing drugs and all that shit. Really just a disgusting human being. I think his music's great. I separate the artist from the art. If you listen to this show, you hear me say that over and over again because so many artists are really kind of fucked up human beings. He's a great singer and he's in a great band, and everyone can make their decisions about him going forward. I say take some money out of his ass just because he had the fucking the balls, having gotten away with that, to still come back and write about it and brag about it. Holy shit. So, Steven Tyler, you're a gross motherfucker. You better open up that checkbook, bitch. Take out that debit card, tap it on a motherfucker's phone, give her millions of dollars, and go fuck off and shut up until you die, fuckhead. All right, moving on.